Well, thanks, Stephen, and hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Protecting Against Multi-Vector Cyber Attacks with MDR and Microsoft 365 Defender. My name is Leonard Voling. I'm the Microsoft Alliance Director at CriticalSTART. CriticalSTART is an MDR company, and we provide MDR services on the Microsoft security stack. Joining me today is Angelica Faber, Principal Cloud Solution Architect, focused on security at Microsoft, and Tommy Scott, a Senior Security Consultant at CriticalSTART. So to start things off and give you a feel for the agenda here and how we'll spend the next 60 minutes, we're going to first just take literally just a moment to formally introduce you to CriticalSTART and talk a little bit about our Microsoft partnership. Then I'm going to hand it over to Angelica, and she's going to provide an overview of Microsoft 365 Defender. We'll spend a quick bit of time talking about how CriticalSTART's MDR works with the Microsoft 365 Defender suite. And really the grand finale where we want to spend most of the time today is with Tommy Scott walking you through a couple of real world incidents, if you will, in a demo kind of format. So that's where we want to get to. Questions are welcome via the chat function throughout. And I'm confident we'll have 10 minutes or so for live Q&A at the end. So please, if you have any questions you want to discuss with us, live, save those for then. In terms of introducing CriticalSTART, I want to touch on a few areas. I'll start with the bottom and speak to just our cybersecurity pedigree. From a SIM perspective, we bring over 100 collective years of SIM engineering experience to the table, and that really crosses over into EDR and XDR. I'd say we've been tracking and working with those solutions all along as well. A key part of our MDR service is our SOC. Those are the humans that are doing that hard work, 24/7, 365. Whether it's Thanksgiving or whether it's just another day of the week. We invest significantly in those folks. So 320 hours of training required for all SOC analysts during onboarding, and 80 plus hours of continuous education every year. So that's a little bit about CriticalSTART and our cybersecurity capability. But when you think about our Microsoft relationship, it also has a lot of depth. So we're actually recruited by Microsoft to be a pilot member of something called the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association MSSP program. We're a Microsoft Gold partner. We're also a member of Microsoft's Security Partner Advisory Council and their Security and Manageability Elite Partner Program. In regards to certifications on the Microsoft side, we really stay focused on the security stack. So we maintain individuals on staff with MS 500, which is focused on that Microsoft 365 world, AZ 500, which is focused on Azure, and then the most recent SC-series, which are more SOC analyst focused. We maintain maintain certifications across all of those areas. So that's hopefully a good quick intro to CriticalSTART. I'm going to hand it over to Angelica to get into the Microsoft 365 Defender intro.
Fantastic. Thank you, Leonard. So as Leonard said, my name is Angelica Faber. I'm a security architect with the Global Partner Solutions at Microsoft. And I'm here today to give you a brief overview of why Microsoft 365 Defender is so good at providing that cross-domain protection. And the secret is in the signals. And I know we talk a lot about the trillions of signals, but they're really, truly valuable. Microsoft has access to a broad set of security signals that we use to generate threat intelligence and security insights. We use those trillions of signals for daily security signals. They're to train our artificial intelligence system and machine learning models. That gives you some advantages over the attackers, which helps us protect customers even before the attack becomes successful breaches. So there are two things that are important. One is the volume of the signals, and the other one is the diversity of those signals. Next slide, please. So where does all that data come from? We have over 1.2 billion PCs, servers, IoT devices that run some version of Windows, all of them providing telemetry. We have hundreds of millions of iOS and Android mobile devices, plus macOS and Linux and IoT endpoints, all that access Microsoft services. And we have more than 1 billion users of Azure cloud services. All of those transactions, and more importantly, the variety of those transactions is very important because we have identity, we have email, we have cloud resources, IoT, as I said. It's just a wide range of very valuable data because maybe one of those signals on their own is not meant much by itself, but when you put that into context with maybe other related signals, then it becomes a clearer picture. So the ability to correlate those signals together, that's what makes it so valuable. Here, I'm going to give you some threat stats that you might find interesting. I find them interesting. Did you know that we have more than 5 billion threat attempts that are blocked each month? Did you know that we also have a threat intelligence database called Corpus that has over 300 million entries? Those are some staggering, very important numbers. Next slide, please. Okay, but how does it all work? So the first part is the product telemetry, like I was mentioning earlier, but that's not all. We also have incident response team that is unfortunately regularly engaged with major incidents at customers, and they're helping them investigate and remediate tasks. However, and we also have specialized detections around detonations in sandboxes, sinkholes, honeypots from some law enforcement actions we have assisted with, such as botnet takedowns that have been on the news recently. We also have external feeds, and we do first-party darknet research as well. So we get data about what is being bought and sold on these criminal forums. And of course, we have sample tools because we offer antivirus services. We have between 4 and 4.5 trillion files in our malware sample zoo. So all of these signals then are processed, and the data passes through a very strict privacy boundary to ensure that the data is only used in ways that customers have agreed to, because we're highly regulated and we take that very seriously. So the data, as shown in here, then goes through that collection, normalization, and behavioral analysis. This is where a lot of the machine learning is done to identify relevant security insights and finding, and then it gets published to an internal API. Next click, please. And this is where the magic happens. This is where various security services like Sentinel and Defender then consume that data, so they can, when you get an alert, you can tell if it's a known false positive somewhere else or if that data is related to something else in the environment, to basically provide findings and context and insight relative to what that service, and then automatically feed new detections back into the system. And then finally, here you see the human factor. At the last count, I think we have over 3,500 security professionals, probably more by now. But these are the teams that are constantly working with this intelligence to hunt for adversaries in various environments, as well as creating queries, tuning the machine learning, and validating new analytics to improve detection overall. Next slide, please. And then, so how does each of these services help with an attack? So this slide shows here the Microsoft tools map to the common steps of an attack chain. And typically, it's easy to connect the dots after the fact, but normally when the attacker is just trying to figure things out, trying to figure out where they can go, based on what is available, it's not so easy, right? So that's why it's so important that you have tools that cover each of these threat landscapes. What you see here is what we find is the dominant pattern with attackers, where their ultimate objective is typically stealing data or maybe ransomware, which has become quite common, or maybe extortion. So there's really no silver bullet. Nothing works 100% of the time, so that's why we have these layered defenses. First click, please. All right, so the services on the entry point and the next steps are Defender for Office, Defender for Endpoint, and Defender for Cloud, which was previously Azure Defender within the Azure Security Center. It was recently renamed. But if we can prevent that end user from clicking that first malicious link, we have disrupted the attack right then and there. So that's where Defender for Office comes in. It provides that protection to for email, for SharePoint, for OneDrive, for Teams, and all these Office 365 services. If they somehow get through, then Defender for Endpoint provides endpoint protection and response capabilities covering workstations, servers, mobile devices, and more. And here we're looking basically for any anomalous behavior. And then we take action to block the attack, because Defender for Endpoint can detect the abnormal behavior and then automatically investigate it. It can actually create these automated sequences to remediate this threat. And then it prompts analysts to approve the cleanup, which can also be auto-approved depending on how it's configured. And then we have Defender for Cloud, which provides the additional capabilities for VMs and coverage of your SQL servers, containers, and more. Keep in mind that Defender for Cloud is not just for Azure Cloud. We also cover AWS and GCP resources. And don't forget that we're sharing signals here across all these services. So if malware is found by one, then it can be cleaned up everywhere that it's found. Additionally, if a device is compromised, access to organizational data can be restricted immediately, so that you can isolate and prevent further compromise. And then once that device is cleaned up, then access is granted again. Because these tools are ultimately designed to work together, right? Next click, please. Okay, so we're moving here into the identity portion of the attack. There are a few services that help here. As you can see, Azure AD Identity Protection protects the identities in the cloud. So we're looking for anomalous behaviors of those identities on the cloud. And then we have Defender for Identity that protects identities on-prem, and that's for both AD and ADFS. But if the attacker, again, manages to get through to the data, then we have Defender for Cloud Apps, which was previously MCAS, which is a CASB, which is a Cloud Access Security Broker service that allows us to enforce specific controls on those SaaS apps. And it provides coverage for both attack detection and data exfiltration. And all of these are now integrated into one console, which makes it really nice so that you can help prioritize really, right, the remediations, because having all these thrown at you, if you can see it all in one screen, then it makes it easier to prioritize. Next click, please. And then obviously you want to be able to look at other applications, other cloud logs, to get the additional perspective information. That's where Microsoft Sentinel comes in, right? Sentinel is our SIEM and SOAR solution. So it's not just logs, but it's also orchestration and automation. And it provides that unified visibility over these tools, as well as event logs, alerts from other security tools, other applications, network devices. It provides also, like I said, the automatic remediation and associated resources by using workflows that trigger based on rules that are configured. And so far we talked only about the external risk, but we can't forget about the internal risk too, right? So for those legitimate users that, for whatever reason, and some of these reasons are listed here, they cause security risk, it leads to exfiltration of data. So that's where Microsoft Insider Risk Management comes in. And it helps minimize internal risk by enabling detection and investigation and actions on malicious and unintentional activities. Because being able to correlate those actions, if an employee recently submitted their resignation and suddenly they're downloading a ton of data, that's very valuable in terms of being able to identify the risk and then being able to respond to that action immediately. So as you can see, these services provide end-to-end integrated visibility for a variety of attack techniques seen both for external attacks as well as insider risk. And now I'll hand it over to Leonard will continue to tell us how CriticalSTART MDR services accelerate the value from these Microsoft tools to improve your team's productivity.
Yeah, thanks, Angelica. That was a great overview. And yeah, looking at this for me is one of the best representations, I've seen of kind of Microsoft's security, compliance, and identity stack. Very uniquely positioned in regards to that breadth and depth of coverage. So it's certainly something that provides a lot of opportunities, I think, for customers and for MDR service providers like CriticalSTART. So, I want to dig into that aspect of it a little bit and talk about, how CriticalSTART provides MDR service on top of the Microsoft security stack. So for a while now, we've had two core offerings. It all started for us with CriticalSTART MDR for MDE. At the time it was Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection. Now Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. That's that classic EDR solution, and this is a place where I believe a lot of customers have invested. It's a space that's I'd say pretty well penetrated in terms of customers identifying the need to have coverage, to have deep visibility, and to have responsive capabilities like isolate hosts. So that was our first offering in the Microsoft space, was MDR for MDE. Then we brought online MDR for Microsoft Sentinel, Microsoft's cloud-based SIEM. And that's great because it opens the door to some of the traditional log sources like firewall. But as Angelica just talked about, Microsoft is very uniquely positioned, I believe, in the XDR space. They got a nod recently from I can't remember if it was Forrester or IDC right off the top of my head, but one of them kind of acknowledging, kind of how far along Microsoft is in having this suite of products that are able to share telemetry between each other, so that when you have signal from email, you can correlate that to the endpoint and to the identity, and it really is a very powerful offering. So seeing that the compelling capabilities of those services, we brought online our MDR for Microsoft 365 Defender. So we have 3 different service offerings. Customers can consume all 3, which is fairly common, or you can consume just MDR for Sentinel or MDR for MDE, or just MDR for Microsoft 365 Defender. So that flexibility to kind of meet you wherever you are on that journey. But hopefully that gives you a feel for how we match up with what Microsoft is doing on the security side. We really don't play in the compliance side of the house. We leave that for the folks that are experts, in compliance and data loss. But when it comes to security, anything in Microsoft 365 Defender and Azure Sentinel, sorry, I knew it was going to happen, Microsoft Sentinel, we've got you covered. So I want to spend just 2 or 3 more quick slides talking about how we do it, and then I'll hand it over to Tommy again to show you how we do it. But first, let's look at a logical architecture. So again, we've got those 3 different integration points. In all cases, we're integrating at an API level. So we don't have our own agent. We don't have our own SIEM. We do have a platform we built called the Zero Trust Analytics platform. The best way to describe Ztap is an event orchestration engine. It's a purpose-built event orchestration engine, purpose-built for SOC analysts. So it exists really solely for that, to make our SOC as efficient as possible. But Ztap hooks into Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, Microsoft 365 Defender, and Azure Sentinel, and ingests the security events from those tools, so that they can be processed through something called the Trusted Behavior Registry. The Trusted Behavior Registry is our catalog of known good SOC analyst investigation. It's really our IP that we bring to the table, and it allows us to resolve false positives at scale. So the tools these days do a great job of detecting, and with that there can be a lot of false positives that are generated. And so, it becomes a classic alert fatigue problem where you're having to sift through a lot of events or alerts that are not malicious to get to that event that is actual attacker activity happening in the environment. So the TBR is a key thing that allows us to scale our operations and be really effective addressing all alerts, criticals, highs, mediums, and lows. Because I think we all know attackers don't come in trying to trip off every alarm bell they possibly can. They come in, they're using live off the land techniques, inbox tools like PowerShell, and they're of course trying to fly under the radar. But as we're ingesting security events from these three sources, we're working those through the Trusted Behavior Registry. Anything that comes out of the Trusted Behavior Registry is not known good. That's where our SOC analysts pick up. Our SOC analysts are going to triage, investigate, and as often as possible, respond to those alerts. Like as I mentioned earlier, with Defender for Endpoint, that response can be something very specific, like isolate hosts. With something like Azure Sentinel and a firewall event type scenario, that response might be more of a guided response, where we're providing feedback, to the customer on what action they need to take to mitigate the threat. The great thing is, whether you're collaborating with our SOC or working alongside of our SOC or in parallel to our SOC, we have something called Mobile SOC. Mobile SOC is just like it sounds. It's an extension of Ztap that is available on iOS and Android, and it's fully functional. So anything you want to do in terms of interacting with an alert, escalating something to the Critical Start SOC, taking a responsive action, that all can be done directly from the Mobile SOC application. So hopefully this gives you a good feel. We have that direct integration into Defender for Endpoint. With Microsoft 365 Defender and those kind of collaboration and identity focused capabilities, those 4 tools called out there, we actually integrate 2 ways. We integrate via Azure Sentinel and via API, and it's very intentional. There's actually some additional fidelity that we get by leveraging Sentinel as a part of that interaction. And then same thing with Sentinel for those third-party sources, we integrate there directly as well. In the upper left, I haven't talked about it, but we also have something in Ztap called Threat Navigator. And Threat Navigator is a great way for our customers to see where are their Microsoft detection logic in play, and we overlay that in a MITRE attack reference. So you can see the tactics that there's coverage for, but we're not just showing the Microsoft capabilities, we're also showing where our detection engineering team is providing coverage as well. So a couple more here, and then we'll get on to the demo. This is just kind of a summary slide, to kind of just break it down, right, in kind of almost like a table format. In the gray, you have the things you're trying to protect in your environment. In the light blue, you've got the different capabilities available from Microsoft across the Microsoft 365 Defender suite and Microsoft Sentinel. And then on the bottom, in the dark blue, you've got the Critical Start MDR services, those 3 services, and how they match up. MDR for Sentinel, MDR for Endpoint, and then MDR for Microsoft 365 Defender that provides coverage for MDO, MDI, Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, and Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So to tee up the demo, I'll walk through a scenario real quickly. As again, with Microsoft 365 Defender, Microsoft offers great coverage for email, collaboration, identity, endpoints, cloud apps. An alert, I'm sure anybody that has these tools deployed is familiar with, is impossible travel. And so if we use that example here, in the Microsoft world, you have the potential to need to interact with 3 or 4 different portals. Now, Microsoft has done a lot of great work to bring this all together into a single unified portal, security.microsoft.com. And it really is a great place to land and to triage alerts from across all of these different threat protection tools. But when you start to have to investigate and respond, you will find yourself gathering data from across multiple portals. And that's going to continue to evolve, right? Microsoft is a software company, and they're going to continue to refine their approach. But just calling that out today, that there is some need to live within multiple portals. And that also means you have to have a SOC team essentially on staff that has the expertise, not just with the Microsoft tools, but also with, how to interpret what is happening with a given security event or security alert. With Critical Start in the picture, we're ingesting all those security events in our platform, Ztap. So we're leveraging on all of that signal that Angelica was talking about. We're leveraging on all of that great detection logic, but we're putting our platform and our SOC kind of in between you and those events. So what that looks like with Critical Start MDR service in play, we become that single pane of glass. You still maintain full administrative access to all of your Microsoft tools. You still maintain administrative access to Azure Sentinel. So if you want to do some threat hunting or do something kind of more advanced or more specific to your business, you're absolutely empowered to do that. But for those core alerts that are being generated every hour, every day, those flow through Ztap. And that's where we leverage on the TBR, we leverage on our SOC analysts to add a ton of efficiency. And I would also argue effectiveness as well in some cases, but a big part of the value prop is efficiency in terms of the actual event management and in terms of how you interface with those events. So that's all we had in terms of overview and discussion for today. I'll hand it over to Tommy to get into a demo.
All right, so I'll go ahead and share my screen, Leonard. Once you stop sharing your screen, I'll be able to share mine. All right. So at least for the panelists, I'll ask one of you to confirm you can see my screen before I start on this trail.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, perfect. So what we're actually looking at here is Ztap, that zero trust analytics platform that Leonard just discussed. It was purpose-built by Critical Start to scale with our customers. Now, obviously, there's a lot of advantages of being hands-on, Microsoft Sentinel. I did learn the new lingo, but hands-on Microsoft Sentinel, hands-on the tools. From our perspective, that wasn't going to scale across, hundreds of Microsoft customers. So what we did was we built our own platform powered by the tools within the Microsoft M365 stack. And so what we're looking at here is Ztap powered by, and if I go to this first screen, you'll see still says Azure Sentinel, but Defender for Endpoint M365 Defender. So that entirety of that stack is coming into this platform. But as Leonard mentioned, our connectivity is API based and it's bi-directional. So we're not just saying we're going to collect alerts and then we promise we're going to do some cool security here. We're going to stand on the shoulders of what Microsoft has built, those 3,500 security individuals that Angelica mentioned. We're going to leverage the tools. We're going to access Graph to reach into each of the M365 components to get more information. But before I discuss exactly how we do that, I just want to give a quick overview of Ztap and how it's very transparent. Because the big thing is, we're relying on Microsoft to do such a great job from the detection, the signals perspective that Angelica went over. We want to make sure that you, the customer, see what are we actually doing with that. So Ztap is 100% unfettered visibility to you, the customer. You have access to it because it's fed by your tools. But what we're going to show you is, that trusted behavior registry that Leonard mentioned, that orchestration component, 40,000+ playbooks. It's the way that we're efficient. It's how we can automatically resolve alerts that we definitively know are good, because Microsoft gives us that visibility, that granularity to make that determination. So you're going to be able to see how effective were those playbooks, what playbook was applied, who created it, who, what, why, and when. But also the thing is, from a investigation perspective, if we've got all this visibility, you actually have to look at it. And so what we're going to show you from an MDR service perspective, what is our mean time to detect and respond for every single one of your alerts? So Critical Start, as Leonard mentioned, contractual 1-hour SLAs for every single alert. Doesn't matter if it's critical, doesn't matter if it's low. All alerts are important from our perspective. That's why they were generated. And so we're going to give you that visibility from here's the outcome of our service. How good was the methodology applied? How good were the SOC analysts when they actually needed to investigate alerts? But one thing I like to talk about, from an MDR perspective is that a lot of people in this space, the MDR space, they try to race to the R. They try to race to response. Look at all the cool things we're going to do on behalf of your organization. But I like to make sure we address both sides of the coin, managed detection. And Leonard touched on it, and we call it Threat Navigator. It's how we take those signals that the Microsoft team has created out of the box inside of the tools you might already own or potentially own in the future. And we actually want to make sure we're getting, just again, unfettered visibility. And so what we're doing here is we're showing, here's the IOCs that come out of the box with kind of the M365 suite going into Microsoft Sentinel. Now, one of the things that I want to focus in on is, Critical Start is very thankful for the work that Microsoft has done, but we want to make sure that we are doing things the way that we determine is going to provide maximum value to the customer. And so a perfect example is explicit MFA deny. This is an out-of-the-box rule written by Microsoft. We're very happy about that. Anytime somebody says, no, this wasn't me, that's a potential indication of account compromise. We want to know about that. But Critical Start's perspective was, we want to know the moment it happens. Aggregation is fantastic. That makes customers kind of more effective by not drowning in the noise. But that's what an MDR is for. Let us handle that alert volume. And so what we've done, you see a similar IOC that we created, and we actually changed it to alert for each and every single event. So what that looks like is, here was the original IOC that we overrode, and here's the one that we're pushing into our customer's environment. We're saying, thank you, Microsoft, for giving us this stepping stone, but we want to see it every single time it happens at the moment of occurrence. So we're actually increasing the scope of the IOC to, again, tell us when it occurs. And that is what is being sent to Ztap. The moment it occurs, it's running through our TBR. If we can say, for some reason, this explicit MFA deny was good, we'd resolve it. But this is a perfect alert that would go right through that TBR, and our SOC would start investigating it at those 1-hour SLAs. And so from my perspective, this is very important, because MDR is great, but response is only great when you actually know when you're supposed to take it. And so from our perspective, we had to focus on both sides of the coin, manage detection and then response second. But one of the things Leonard mentioned was, 320 hours of training for our SOC analysts, certifications out the wazoo, things that prove they're good at what they do. And we have all the faith that they are great at what they do, but humans are fallible. So we wanted to build in certain security controls into this platform to make sure they're going to deliver a consistent output. Because it doesn't matter how valuable we think our service is wrapped around the Microsoft stack. If customers don't agree, the customer is correct. And so what we did is, for many of our Microsoft events, we built things called event hints. This is basically setting the table for our SOC analysts to say, here is what Critical Start expects of you, because it's what our customers expect of us. So Leonard kind of went over that impossible travel activity scenario, and this is our event hint for that. Our analysts, extremely talented, very well versed in the Microsoft, capabilities, what they should expect from the tool. But this is what we want them to do every time. Why do we care about this alert? Why are we investigating? What is the point of having MDR for this? How do they actually perform the investigation? Now, of course, we expect they know that, but we're going to give them a gentle reminder, because again, output, consistent output is important. And then also, what are some possible remediation steps that can occur? Because we are MDR, we want to respond. Can we actually take that? And here's kind of the top responses we expect are going to be valuable to the customer. And then also, what's indicative of a possible false positive? Possible travel activity, there's basically two reasons that occurs. There's a VPN being used, or there's Superman. The second is not as likely. So typically we see users logging in with a VPN, the vast majority of the time is the reason this alert occurs. However, vast majority isn't all the time. And that's why we have to investigate and resolve every single alert. You have to be sure, because if you leave alerts out there, you disregard low priorities, you simply don't have enough time, that risk is ultimately always going to be assumed by the customer. And from our perspective, we had to find a way to go around that, make sure we could resolve every alert. And that was the advent of that trusted behavior registry, resolving things you definitively know are good up front, and then simply investigating everything after that. But a lot of things I've showed so far, that's kind of the philosophical part of MDR. Now I want to get into, how do we actually do it? What does it look like? So again, this platform, completely transparent to the customer, unfettered access to it. This is where our SOC works out of, and it's the only place our SOC works out of. So you get to see, again, who does what, why, and when at any given time. You know, on Leonard's slide, if you notice, the Ztap box was blue. It was intentionally not a black box. But again, this is where you get to work out of alongside of our Critical Start SOC. So this example was a phishing email. Maybe it's phishing, we're not sure, because it was actually reported by the user. So again, that capability exists. You know, as Angelica said, Microsoft is pretty good at actually blocking it before it gets there if it's true, you know, determined to be malware or phishing. But in that scenario where the email is just a bunch of text and we're not really sure it got through, but the user is suspicious, they report that up as potential phishing. So this scenario is kind of interesting because this was actually reported by one of my colleagues who was supposed to run this webinar today, but he had some things come up. His name's Charlie Smith. If you want to hear all the smart Microsoft words, he knows them. I'm just mimicking them. But he actually showed me how to do this with an email that I sent him. So I promise I wasn't phishing my own company. But a couple of things that, you know, stood out to us as we were looking through this is, one, you scroll down right here, immediately you see DMARC is none. That already makes us a little more suspicious from a security perspective. And so there's a couple of things that Critical Start can do is, one, via API, we're reaching into the different components of M365. We need to go into Microsoft Sentinel. We need to go into the Defender 365 console directly. But again, what I just did straight from here was says, you know what, show me all the entities from that event. So via API, we're pulling that data back so that our SOC can make a well-informed decision, but also make it quickly. Because it is fantastic, all the work Microsoft has done to consolidate into, you know, single platform, single consoles. But we built our own console. We have, you know, number of customers running M365. For us to pivot into all of that would make us inefficient. So that's why we access Graph. That's why we bring the data to us, but also give you the customer way to do that quickly as well. Now, I will say, half joking, this is our actual production instance. Critical Start, Microsoft customer running the M365 stack. Now, one of the cool things that we're able to do is actually pull this email out of the inbox. What's not cool is I'm in sales now. I used to be on the customer side, so they don't trust me with those buttons anymore. So here you see triage. There's actual response actions that can be taken as well. So actually pulling that email out of the inbox, we will do that. We are able to take that action because of that API connectivity. But again, I guess I've lost my trustworthiness having been in sales now. But pivoting away from email, now we're going to go into you know, some of the other M365 components. So this one was actually MCAS, now Defender for Cloud Apps, multiple failed login attempts. There's a lot of good information here. But again, there's more data to be had. And there's a reason why Critical Start doesn't run our own SIM and say, just stream us all your Microsoft syslog, because that's a binary set of information. It's ones and zeros. What you have is what you have to make a decision from. There's a lot of variables that go into the decision of whether or not this is actually a false positive, or unfortunately, sometimes a true positive. And so again, those threat analysis plugins are very valuable, that API connectivity. If we need to pivot into the console, get entities, get the secure score, we're able to. But also for this user, okay, multiple failed login attempts, you know, show me their recent sign-ins, 4 hours before that event, 2 hours after. And so what we're doing is we're actually pulling that from Azure AD sign-in logs. And here you see there were 6 instances of them signing in. Well, this table is very, very long. So we built event analysis. Let's look for entropy. How frequently or how frequently do we see key value pairs? So the first thing I'm going to do is say, okay, there were multiple failed login attempts, but you know, let's talk about when they were successful. Was MFA required? Yes, it was completed in Azure AD, and then it was satisfied in the token for the remaining 5 sign-ons that occurred. Already, I'm feeling a little less suspicious because I know MFA worked, MFA everywhere. And so from our perspective, again, let's just go look at the data. How many agents did they log in from? Okay, here's that information. You know, if we need to see, you know, what country or region, what city, what state, we're able to see all of that very quickly, straight from this console. So our SOC isn't having to pivot, you know, between consoles, adding time to, is this potentially malicious? But the thing is, okay, they signed in, fantastic. What did they actually do when that occurred? So let's go get their O365 activity. Let's reach into MDO. So here we see, okay, you know, Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, we're able to see a couple of different things they were doing. Again, not all of this information is going to be necessary for us to make a decision, but more information was never bad because you need to make a well-informed decision. So again, that capability of reaching into graph and saying, give us more data and do so quickly, that's the advantage of how we built our own MDR platform. We're able to wrap it around Microsoft. But then last but not least, one of the things I still can do, because this is a demo environment, right from here, you say, you know what, this user actually is risky. I'm going to go ahead and confirm that. So obviously within M365, you say, you know what, for user risk of high, that policy can automatically enforce that user to reset their password. So actually taking remediation actions that exist, disabling users, refactoring with MFA, those are capabilities our SOC is going to be able to take, but you will be able to take as well as a customer straight from the mobile app. So of course, that was a little cart before the horse there. I'm going to show it here in just a moment. But just wanted to wrap up with one more example, because obviously, Leonard said Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is a separate integration, but it's still a part of the M365 Defender kind of suite. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to pivot over to an MDE alert, just to give you an idea of, some of the different capabilities. It's a lot of the same philosophy. How are we going to actually investigate the alert? How are we going to make a determination and then finally respond? So from an investigation point of view, things called trigger events. Those are events from Critical Start's perspective that went through the trusted behavior registry, could not be confirmed as good. Each one of these we consider a threat. We investigate at the 1-hour SLA. So there's 4 events. That's not a lot, but there's a lot of data. And so again, humans are fallible. So we want to make sure we make them as efficient as possible. And to Leonard's point, as effective as possible. So I'm going to go down here into something called event analysis. Again, it's looking for that entropy. And so here you see across those 4 events, there were 2 command lines observed. Now this is basically the same thing, but you see the user made an error and put a space or did not put a space here. So the command failed. So again, that's from our perspective, it's probably somebody just fat fingering something, but any usage of the net command, 95% of the time, if not more, that's just either known good activity or it's benign. But it's also potentially indicative of reconnaissance. And so here what you'll see is this alert actually had that prefix of CS and a number. This is one of those custom IOCs that we push into your environment to make Microsoft better. Now, that's not saying Microsoft's bad. Microsoft's fantastic. But the ability to make it more noisy, more effective exists, and we want to take advantage of that. We want to use our 100+ years of experience that Leonard mentioned to say, we have ideas of what indicate threats. Let's make sure the tools do their job. Because if tools can generate alerts, we believe they should. And so here's one we pushed into Microsoft and just said, hey, MDE, anytime you see net.exe or net1.exe, let us know. Don't consider any sort of risk algorithms, cumulative risk scoring, just tell us it occurred. Because that's where you see those really subtle TTPs that sometimes slip through the cracks. This is where you get that visibility. The capability in MDE exists and we want to exploit it. We want to use it. But when we make a determination, again, if we want to respond, we will. Request full host isolation, we're going to take that activity right here. Now that device off the network. It's not an agent Critical Start has. It's not an additional, orchestration layer that you have to go purchase. It's part of our MDR service is just using your tools. So now this is where I want to kind of end it with, all the buttons in this platform, they're cool. They do a lot of great stuff, but this is where the Critical Start SOC works out of 24/7, 365. Customers have, again, unfettered access to it, but you're not required to be in here. That is why a lot of customers reach out to MDR and say, we need help. We don't have enough time. We don't have enough people. That's what we're doing. That is the core of our service. Now, what we did do is we built a mobile application. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over a little bit. I'm going to share my phone. We'll expand this a little bit. So this is a mobile representation of Ztap. It's called Mobile SOC. Leonard obviously touched on a lot of its capabilities. Cool part about my job is I just get to show it. And so you see right away, what are the KPIs? We promised 1 hour for mean time to detect and respond. How are we doing? And again, those SLAs are contractual for every single priority. Lows are just as important as critical because we're thinking about context. Again, it's not that alerts occur, it's why did they occur? So what we want to do from a mobile SOC perspective is Critical Start will respond. because of how we connect in programmatically to your Microsoft suite, we are happy to take response. But we're only going to do so under two circumstances. The response that needs to be taken can be taken via the way we connect in, and you give us permission. So that's not a case-by-case permission, it's a rules of engagement. During our onboarding session, let us know what are your sensitive devices, CEO's laptop. Probably don't want to isolate that at 2 p.m. Critical production servers, never isolate those, let the customer make that determination. So we go ahead and we build that into our customer organization notes. Hey, for all devices in the subnet, do not isolate. That's an automatic escalation, again, post notification. We're MDR, we're not managed alert forwarding. But after you investigate, escalate to this group because we were not told specifically do not isolate. So that scenario, that's where mobile SOC really comes into play and becomes something more than a mobile ticketing system. It becomes an actual security tool. So for purpose of demonstration, we're going to pretend I'm now on the customer side, which I actually was from a CS MDR perspective. I'm going to assign this alert to myself. What we do in Ztap is auditable. So you go up here, you see, I assign the alert to myself. It's now locked. That means no one can come behind me and close this alert, which is very important because, again, hate to keep ragging on humans, but they're fallible. We don't want them to potentially create visibility gaps because they closed an alert that didn't belong to them. So again, we're putting security in place where it is needed. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to hop over to mobile SOC now. You see this assigned to me as 17. If I refresh this screen, it should change to an 18. So typically there's a push notification, but being that I'm on a webinar and I don't want kid pictures popping up, put my phone on do not disturb. But from a security perspective, what you're going to get is a quick idea of how am I doing from an actual alert point of view, critical, high, medium, and low. Those priorities are set by critical start post investigation, because we are very thankful for the priority set by Microsoft, but we want to make sure it's contextually relevant to your specific organization. So we set priority after we perform the investigation, because again, it's not that alerts occur, we care why they occurred. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hop into assigned to me, and you're actually going to see that same alert, 51551, 51551. I'm going to go into here and, it's 2 a.m. I'm the new guy at your customer organization. Of course, I'm going to be the short straw, and I'm going to be on call. Let's go into comments and why am I being woken up right now? Again, contextual priority. What did we see? Translated to actual risk. Again, why do we care about this? And then finally, what do we recommend you do next? So this scenario, we didn't see anything malicious. That's why it's a medium priority. We'd never seen it before. Somebody's running some commands, which typically is not overly common outside of IT itself, but it's something we want to know more about. But if you make the determination, that user should never be doing that, what you're going to have the capability to do is, go over into the actual alerts themselves, triage, look at all of the information afforded to you by, in this case, MDE. But also these little blue bubbles represent those threat analysis plugins, that API connectivity. So from here, you say, that user shouldn't be doing that, but they're actually interactively logged on. So maybe I'm going to give them a call because they're not going to be too happy because in the next 10 seconds, I'm about to take their device off the network. So you actually took that action straight from your phone. And that's the power of mobile SOC. It's just mobilizing the tools you already own. And so from our perspective, it's not just MDE. If I go through here and I go into the actual, different tools, I'm able to, assign this M365 alert to myself. Now I go ahead and I refresh that. Now we should have 19. I hop right into here. You see there's unfamiliar sign-in properties, which will pull up here in just a second. Oh, it's a little bit older. There it is. Unfamiliar sign-in properties. And so from the same perspective, you're going into the alerts and you're saying, okay, unfamiliar sign-in. That's not as descriptive as I would hope. So I need more information. So I'm going in here and I'm saying, for this user, again, show me their recent sign-ins. I'm able to see that. Show me their O365 activity, pulling all that information to you quickly to make a well-informed decision. Because again, 2 a.m., maybe I don't want to deal with this. Remediation can be after my cup of coffee at 8. Let's confirm this user is risky. Next time they try to authenticate, they're going to have to reset their password. They're going to have to refactor with MFA. We've taken care of that just using the tools you already own. So being the nerd I am, I could keep talking about this for probably another hour, but we're coming up at about 10 minutes left. I've talked about kind of all the high salient points. Of course, we could click a bunch of buttons for another, hour or so, but Leonard, Angelica, I'll turn it back to y'all as the moderators of this event. And if there's any questions, we want to do them live or via Q&A, happy to answer them.
I think Leonard is busy.